Good morning, Year 10. Nice of you to join us again. Now, hopefully you've watched Lesson 1 and 2, as well as the required practical. What we're now going to take the opportunity to do is look at the products that are made during the process of photosynthesis and how the plant utilises those products to ensure that it is as purposeful and they are utilised within the plant, and the different ways that the plant utilises those products for its different life processes. Okay, so let's start off with a quick quiz. I suggest you pause the video now and answer questions 1 to 10 in your own words. So here are the answers. Number 1, state 3 limiting factors. Now you could have had 4 different options. You could have had light or photons of light, temperature, remember it has to be temperature and not heat, carbon dioxide, word or chemical formula. If you put the chemical formula, make sure that we've got a capital C, capital O, lowercase, subscript 2, and then chlorophyll concentration. What is the word equation? Again, it doesn't matter which way round you have the carbon dioxide and water or the glucose and oxygen. It's just more important that you've got the left and the right hand side correct. What is the name of the organelle where photosynthesis takes place? And we need to be always using the word chloroplast because that is the organelle. Chlorophyll is the pigment, not the organelle. Give 2 ways in which the leaf is adapted for photosynthesis. And we need to be talking about any 2 from the following list. You can talk about them being broad and flat for maximum light absorption, thin for fast rate of diffusion of CO2 and O2. Chlorophyll being present for photosynthesis, the vascular bundle there providing water and nutrients absorbed from the roots and to relocate those dissolved sugars that are created during the process of photosynthesis. We need to be talking about stoma, the small holes on the underside of our leaf that are there for the diffusion of gases. Number 4, why is photosynthesis considered an endothermic reaction? And we need to talk about the fact that it requires light energy from the environment for the reaction to take place. No light, no photosynthesis. What are the products of photosynthesis used for? Primarily, it's always going to be respiration. Back to your Mrs. Nerg. Which leaf cells have the most chloroplasts? Sorry, tongue-tied there. Palisade, mesophyll. Bit of a mouthful, but put mesophyll, but ideally we want to be saying palisade mesophyll. They're nice little rigid ones that are lined up like a brick wall across the top half of the leaf. What is the role of the guard cells? Now, our guard cells are those little sausage-shaped cells, and they can open and close depending on how turgid they are. Now, why do ornamental plants with large white areas on their leaves grow slower than green leaf plants? So these are like my variegated geraniums, maybe my spider plants. And basically, if you have less chloroplast, there is less photosynthesis. Therefore, they produce less sugars, so there is less respiration. Can you see I'm using lots of comparatives there? We need to be using that comparative language, especially if this was a 4-mark answer. They would want you to be able to compare that process and how it is affected down the chain. Number 9, what is the temperature? What temperature do enzymes in plants denature? And we're looking at anything in the range of 40 to 50 degrees. Remember, this is for plant cells. Okay, so back to our equation. Can we balance our equation? So using the products of photosynthesis. Now, we need to remember that every living organism respires, not photosynthesize. It respires. And therefore, they need that oxygen for that process. We're going to talk about respiration next week. However, this week we're just looking at how that photosynthesis creates that oxygen and the glucose for respiration. It's really key to remember that photosynthesis only occurs when it's light. It can't occur during the night, so therefore it is limited to daylight hours, especially in the UK where we have varying daylight hours depending on the time of year. Think about this. Take a minute. What do you think the word equation is for respiration? It is simply the reverse of photosynthesis. So it's glucose plus oxygen gives me carbon dioxide and water. Right, so now my uses of glucose within the plant. Some of the glucose is used during respiration, quite a significant proportion. And some of it is converted to starch for storage. That's really important because we've talked about osmosis, and actually if we store it as glucose, it's water soluble and it affects the water potential in the cells. Some of it is used for producing oil or fat as an energy store, and that's really important because that's what our waxy cuticle is made of. This is what our seeds are made of. Both really important when we're referring to our life processes. Cellulose for cell walls, and cell walls are unique because they have this cellulose structure which makes them really rigid, allowing the plant to grow hundreds of meters high. Think of your Canadian redwoods. And making proteins. So not just amino acids, but we're also making synthesizing DNA. So let's just take a quick look. This is my molecule glucose, which is a monomer, which means there's a single one of it, like a bead. And so we talk about that being a single unit. It's a monomer. Mono meaning singular. And then we have two different polymers of our monomer. That means that these are attached on together like a string of beads, starch literally attached as they appear along a long chain. Whereas cellulose, we've got one the correct way up, one the upside down, one the correct way up, one upside down. And that is a repeating pattern. And therefore, these join together to make a polymer. We could use enzymes to literally break off one of those molecules of glucose, and we could then utilize that for the process of respiration. However, both these are storage molecules which are crucial to the plant. So take a second just to think about why this is so important. Glucose is soluble in water, therefore it is going to have a huge impact on the rate of osmosis, the movement of water in and out of cells. Cells become hypotonic and hypertonic depending on how much water is available and the glucose that is impacting on the concentration gradient. Starch is insoluble in water, so therefore it has no impact on the rate of osmosis. Therefore, starch can be found all over the plant. And then when photosynthesis isn't occurring, maybe at night, maybe when it's a cloudy day and there is insufficient photosynthesis, that starch can be broken down for respiration. You may want to make some notes on this. So we often test photosynthesis. Now this is a practical you would have done lower down school, definitely in year 8. So we can either you might have had a leaf that was 2 different colours, or you may have just done it with one singular leaf. And I'm going to talk through this, and while I'm doing this, I'd like you to make a flow chart of your ideas, because you would be expected to explain this and what is happening at each stage and the purpose of some of the steps of this method. So we think about it to start with. We can either remove the whole leaf or a small piece of leaf. There was no point in being a massive leaf. And we're going to put it in a boiling water for 1 minute. This kills the cells, and it makes them leaky. It ruptures those cell membranes and it breaks open the cellulose, allowing the cells to become more permeable. It also removes that waxy layer. Okay, and you'll see when you're doing this that the water becomes a slightly murky colour. We're then going to put the dead leaf into alcohol and heat it in hot water bath for up to 5 minutes. And the alcohol will go like a dark green colour because the chlorophyll and the chloroplast have ruptured, the chlorophyll is coming out, and it is now leaking and seeping into my alcohol. you'll see that the alcohol is boiling vigorously, and that's because the alcohol has a much lower boiling point than water. We then dip the leaf into the hot water again to soften it, because the alcohol has dried it out and made it quite rigid. And if we try and then unfold it, it will break up into pieces. So we're going to swish it around in the hot water. Doesn't need to be boiling, so it's nice and soft. Then we're literally going to flatten it out on a nice white tile, spreading it out so it is as flat as possible. Dab off any excess water, and then we're going to add iodine. Now, iodine is an indicator solution. Okay, and that will, in the presence of starch, it will go blue-black. So if you've done a variegated leaf, that's a leaf with lots of the white ornamental stuff around the edges or a stripe up the middle, what you will see is that the white areas will remain the brownish colour, whereas the green areas will have turned blue-black. You may need to leave this a couple of minutes just for the iodine to soak through, depending on which type of leaf you've used. So take a minute, think about your steps. You should be able to give me the 7 steps. So we need to now complete this risk assessment. Now, what I want you to do is copy this table, pause the slide, copy the table, and take 10 minutes. I would like you to think about each of the risks and how we can reduce those risks reasonably within a lesson, okay? Take a minute, copy the table, complete it. So, plants use some of that glucose that they make to make amino acids, which again are going to be my monomers. They can combine with different things to make different materials. So we're looking at making nitrates. Now, nitrates are really, really important because nitrates are used in DNA. They are used in protein synthesis. So those nitrates are important for hormones and enzymes. So lots of other living processes that we need. Now, some plants do not absorb their nitrates through their roots. Some plants can be carnivorous, and this is a Venus flytrap, like you can see below. Now, it doesn't actively go around snapping at plants. It lures the plant, snapping at insects. It lures the insect to the mouth of the plant, the flower, sorry, not mouth. And it's covered in sticky mucus, which the insects then can't get away from. It then slowly closes, okay? It closes, not snap shut, but it closes quite quickly. That mucus then digests those insects and absorbs those nitrates. Some of the bigger carnivorous plants trap small mammals, mice, and small birds. So this is my mind map, and in a minute I'm going to ask you to think how all of these link together, and you're going to be creating your own using the information provided. There are 6 fundamental uses of glucose, and I've tried to link them together here in my mind map so that you can see how they are linked together. Now, there are other links that I could make, and those other links are what you're going to be added using the next few slides. So starting off, I've done the first one for you. So the use 1 is used in respiration, and glucose is broken down using the oxygen to provide energy for the cell. This energy is then released during respiration, again for anabolic processes to build bigger molecules. If I was thinking about this, I could then also potentially draw maybe a mitochondria. I could also draw a plant cell. Make it as visual as possible. The more visuals you add, the more you're going to remember. I've also got number 2, that some of it is converted to starch. So again, here I might make some notes on cellulose and starch and polymers and monomers. Making complex carbohydrates. Okay, so I might want to draw out my chain of cellulose and starch. I also would like to draw your attention to making amino acids. You might want to link that to why amino acids are so important as for life processes, building fats and oils. Why do we need these fats and oils? What use are they to the plant? And why are they essential for life as a plant? And then biofuels. Now, biofuels, again, depending on what you recall from C2, biofuels are one way of making carbon neutral fuel. So the carbon dioxide absorbed from the atmosphere is utilised to make glucose, and then once that fuel is then burnt, the same amount of CO2 is released back into the atmosphere. So it's a carbon neutral process. So what we're going to do is you've got 10 minutes and you are going to include all these following keywords in your mind map. You might want to make 2 mind maps. It might take more than 10 minutes. However, the following slides give you all the information you need, so it might be worth rewinding this from back to 16 minutes each time and watching through a couple of times, pausing it and making notes on each of the areas. You're going to make your own mind map covering those 6 key uses of glucose. So now you've made your mind map, I'd like you to complete the self-assessment task set on Doddle, and you will be able to consolidate all of the information from lessons 1 to 4 and answer the questions. Now, if you haven't watched the previous videos, you are going to struggle. You really are going to struggle. So I really urge you to go back and have a go at these. Thanks. Bye. See you next week.